Kaylee, welcome to the Lifted podcast. Cheers. I feel like we have to cheers because this is the first time that we've ever had wine on the podcast.
Because I asked for it?
And
or because I thought you were drinking an old fashioned?
Well, yes, okay, I have to tell that. So, what was it, a couple days ago? Two or 3 days ago?
Yeah.
She messaged me on Instagram and she's like, you're like, is that an old fashioned? I was like, holding a glass of wine, tea. It was tea.
Yeah.
And I was like, no, but do you want wine for the podcast? You're like, yeah, sure, why not? I was like, cool.
I was like, it could have been old fashions.
So I don't even know how to make that.
You just get the mix.
There's a mix?
Oh, yeah.
Well, now we need a part 2 so that we
There's
can
like
have
a Knob
old-fashioned.
Creek mix is pretty good. And then you just put it on ice.
Really?
Yeah.
With the giant ice cube, though. Like, it has to be, like, the big, like...
They, when I bought that mix, it came with, like, the 2 giant ice cube molds.
Do you have it?
Yeah.
What?
Sorry. You said wine and I agreed.
Come back. Cut. We're reading. Just kidding. Okay, so I feel like I'm excited about this podcast. Like, I've been excited for all week, even though it's only Tuesday. Is it Tuesday? Yeah.
It's only Tuesday?
But I know. I feel like it's been like, it's been a long week already. We're only at Tuesday.
You saw my schedule.
I did.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Insane. Like literally hour after hour after hour. And then you scroll down, it's like podcast. I was like, ooh, I'm in there. I'm in the schedule.
I made crafts in between.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. There was a little space.
Yeah.
That's where you made the snowflake.
Mm-hmm.
Love that.
Yeah.
Let me just drink my wine for a second. So, first question, because I feel like I have always felt this. Like, okay, I haven't really wanted kids for like ever. Since ever. I worked at a Boston Pizza. And when I worked at a Boston Pizza, you just deal with a lot of awful kids.
I worked at Tony Roma's, so I feel like
it's
probably the same.
So you get it.
Except people eat ribs there.
Yeah, Boston Pizza's all like pasta and pizza. And
I take my kids to Boston Pizza.
Really?
I'm sorry.
It's like the big hockey teams that come in that are like all 10 and 12 and you have kids running around and you're like, oh my God, and the parents just do nothing. They just let their kids run around.
I'm the one that's yelling at my kids in Boston Pizza.
Oh,
Sit down!
It's okay. We like you because you control your kids.
It's like, I think like half the time my yelling controls them. And then the other half is I'm like Charlie Brown's teacher.
Yeah.
And
just
don't
yelling
care.
and they're just running around and just, yeah. That's fine.
It's like talking to rocks.
You're like, I've given up. I'm not doing it anymore.
But I interrupted you with my Tony Roma's.
No, that's fine. Basically, we both worked at places where kids were just awful. And it was I feel like I walked out of that place and I was like, okay, like, I don't think I want kids. And I told my mom that and she was like, well, I didn't want kids until I was like 32. I'm 27, so I'm waiting for the 5 years to just see if I want kids. We're just, letting it, see what happens. Anything can change. So, did you want kids?
No. I was 32 when I had my first kid.
Really?
Actually. And I bet you if you asked my mom, she would point out, like, I absolutely told her that I was never having kids multiple times growing up.
It was a job.
For sure. I told her I wasn't going to have kids. I didn't want kids. And I was thinking about this on the way here because I knew this was, like, going to be the first question. So I was like, even, like, before I met and married my husband, I was engaged before him. And even when I was engaged to that person, I didn't want kids. Like, it wasn't, like, in my radar. Probably because it was, like, horrendous. Like, I still have nightmares that I ended up marrying this person and, like, I'm trapped. That's how bad it was. Why was I engaged to this person? Don't know. Because I was in my early 20s and stupid. Maybe. Right? But you're, like, you know how you try to convince yourself that things are the right thing? I think it was that type of relationship. But I never had that desire to, like, have children. And I remember meeting my husband, and he's 4 years younger than me. 4 years younger than me. So he's younger than me. So when I met him, I think I was 28. So, and he was, like, 23 or 24. So he was, like, still a baby.
Hey, wait, were you okay with that? Like, what was your vibe going into that? Because I feel like women either go for, like, and one of my friends was dating younger, and she was hesitant to start dating him only for that reason. And I think they're still together. Like, they're very happy. So I'm
I
just
don't
like,
think I knew he was that much younger than me going into it, but he was like, it was really funny because he, so I met him at the gym, and
of course.
we like went on one date. We didn't even go on a date. We like hung out. He picked me up from a bar and drove me home, which is like super funny that was like the first time we ever hung out. But we ended up like talking, and then that was like a Saturday, and then the Monday he like found my car. He's gonna hate me for telling this story.
Don't send him
He
this
won't watch
podcast.
it. Like, so I'm at the gym, and then I come out of the gym, and there's like roses on my car with like a note. And so he had found out what I was driving, and then found my car and left roses on it. And my initial thing was being like, what is wrong with this person? Why are they like, I called my friend and I was like, oh my God, what's happening? Why is this person doing this? And I was freaking out because I'm like, no one's supposed to be that nice. Why would he do that? Why would he even like me that much? That's ridiculous. We've hung out once. Like, and I remember my friends being like, maybe you should just like calm down and like see what happens. And so there's like, had to like get over this thing in my head because you date assholes for so long that's just like the normal. So when someone's nice, you're like, what's wrong? Why are you being so nice to me? You're being creepy.
That's so funny.
Right?
You're like, why are you doing this?
Yeah. And then I remember being like, I remember calling him and being like, was that you that left it? And like, kind of like hoping he was going to be like, no. And I was like, because I would rather have a stalker than a nice boyfriend.
You're like, I hope this is not the guy that I'm dating. Or the guy that I saw.
But so like once I allowed myself to like get over that piece where it's like I realized he was like wasn't like other guys, like he wasn't like a ladies' man or anything like this. And it was like very early on. I was like, this is the right person for me. And I remember we like bought our house. We bought a house together, and I was like, I'm not living with someone unless I'm married to them. So you better propose quick. Right? And we bought this house in like May, and then we moved in that May, and then the following like around Christmas time I was like, so we like talked about getting married, like I booked a wedding venue in March. So then he proposed, like it was actually just like it was 10 years ago in November, so it's like kind of funny, but he did propose. But it was like,
wait,
and then,
he literally booked it before he proposed.
well, we had talked about getting married. We knew we were gonna get married. It was just like get I need to put some fire under your butt that this is the date. What do you think about March 5th? And he was like, cool. Guess I'm proposing.
Well, it's booked, so figure out the proposal. Bring me a ring.
Yeah.
That's so funny.
Exactly. And then but I remember like from the minute we got married, I was like, that'd be really cool to like make a kid with a person that you love that much. And I think that's like when I started thinking about it.
So it was the guy.
And I was like, because that was like the person. I was like, I don't want to just have a kid. Like, I didn't want to be a mom because I wanted to be a mom. I wanted to like be a mom because I was like, this is a logical step for like the person that I love that much and that loves me that much. And like, that's kind of cool that you like love someone so much that you like get to have sex and that randomly turns into like a human being. That's kind of crazy if you think about it.
It's kind of crazy. And I actually think that a lot of times it is the person.
Yeah.
Like, a lot of times. Like, I mean, a lot of girls will just, like, I mean, they just want kids. They just grow up and they're like, I literally just want to be a mom. Like, I know Kylie Jenner was like that. She was like, I just want to be a mom since, like, forever. But, yeah, I think it would probably be the person. Could you see him as, like, a dad? Like, before you guys had kids? Like...
Yeah, I think he was more nervous about, like, how he would be as a dad than I was nervous about that. And that's, like, partly because of like stuff with his childhood and whatnot, but like I like knew that there would never be, I was like, you'll be a better dad than I am, like a mom for sure. He is a better dad than I am a mom. He's like always calm and always chill. They always love daddy because he like doesn't yell and freak out and do the mom things. He's just like swoops in all calmly.
Yeah. It's always the guy that's calmer.
And be like,
more calm.
He'll be like, I'll be like screaming at them because they're not listening, and he'll just come in and like try to make them laugh, and I'll be like, this is infuriating. but you're trying not to laugh at the same time.
You're like, I'm trying to punish them right now, and you're making them laugh. Stop it.
And I asked him, like, we got married, and I remember asking him for, like every single day, being like, do you want to make a baby today? And he'd be like, no, not yet. And then one day he was like, okay. And I was like, I don't even know what to do about this right now.
You're like, wait.
You said yes? We can make a baby today? That's weird. What do we do?
Do I retract the question? What do I didn't ask.
And then we're like, okay, we'll make a baby. And then it was like instantly pregnant. Make a baby. Done. Didn't even get to have fun with it for a few months.
Just pregnant right away.
Just pregnant.
Wow. Did you feel lucky that you were? Because, I mean, I feel like women sometimes struggle.
I was blessed for sure. Like, I also wasn't stressed about it.
Oh, yeah.
And then even when we decided to have kids, we had a discussion to be like, what happens if we try and we can't get pregnant? What's our next step? And we both decided that we're not like going to die on the hill of having a child. If it happens, it happens. But I didn't want to go through fertility treatment or stress myself out about that. So we really like decided that like, if it happens that we get pregnant and have a baby, great. If it doesn't, then we're going to be completely happy with like our dogs and ourselves, and we'll travel and do other fun things, but I'm not going to force it to happen. So I guess even in that point, it wasn't because I wanted a child. It's because like that was what I wanted to do with my husband. Mm-hmm. Right?
That's actually so nice because it does take the stress off. If you guys are like very on the same page of like, you know, we're happy with our dogs or we're happy with, you know, just traveling or whatever, then there's no stress. And you're like, okay, if it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't.
Yeah.
Which is nice. Mm-hmm. Speaking on the kid topic, your son, do you want to tell that story? I'm going to let you tell the story. I'm not even going to ask the question. Because I feel like you're going to relay it better than I could. So.
Yeah. I was thinking like, since you sent me those questions, I was like, okay, how am I going to approach this? This is like the first time I've really talked about this, like openly with someone that's like not someone really close to me. And then obviously it's going to be like out there. So I want to like tread really carefully on the subject because there's like a lot more people than me just like that are involved. And I just like, I guess preface it by being like really clear that like lots of healing has happened and like there's been like, we're in a good place and moved forward. But there was a time like it would be 4 years ago in June where my son was attacked by a dog. And we were out at a vacation house with my family and another family and some other people that we were really close with. And one of them had a dog there. And yeah, it attacked my son. He was 3. And it was not like, I mean, I'm going to say that it was out of nowhere. And that's with saying that, like, it wasn't my son instigating something. Like, I think a lot of times, like, dog attacks happen because, you know, a kid's playing in their food or pulling their tail so my son was doing nothing. He was standing there, not bothering the dog. I mean, the dog was obviously in, like, a house that wasn't theirs, and you never know what's going on in a dog's head. They're animals, whatever. But it chose like my son as that target in whatever instance that was kind of happening, and went for him like multiple times. So it was like, I was really surreal because I was standing and watching this happen. So I was standing with one of the people that I was there with, and I was looking in front of me, and we were probably like from here to your door, right? And there's the front door of the place, and my husband was standing there. He was holding my 4-month-old daughter because she was like, I mean, she was 4 months old. I was postpartum. Like, it was like, you're still like, look semi-pregnant at 4 months, right? Like, she was still little. Like, that's like, I don't know, people that don't have kids, like 4 months old, they like barely hold their head up by themselves. Like, they're not sitting up by themselves fully.
They're still like
yet,
a little
right? Like
potato that you're
they're
holding,
a baby.
like,
yeah. So my husband was holding her, and he was just, you know, they were looking out this front window, and my son was standing next to him, and the dog was sitting beside my husband. And I remember watching the dog like stand up and walk in between like my husband and my son. And then I remember like watching, because the dog like turned towards my kid, and he was just like suddenly on his face. And it took me like a second to be like even register what was happening, because my son's like screaming this dog's name, and I was kind of like, are they playing? Because like this isn't the first time we've been with this dog. Like we've been around the dog before, right? And the dog's been on top of my kid before, like licking his face. So I was not sure, but I think it took a second to register that wasn't like what I was hearing. And then my son actually like fell underneath like a bench that was at the front door, which I really believe saved his life, because he was stuck, like he was underneath there, so the dog couldn't like get a hold of him, right? But still went for him like multiple times. And I remember watching, and like my husband has like my daughter in his one arm, and he's holding like trying to hold the dog with the other arm, and it's like 100-pound dog.
Oh yeah, like
this is a
dog.
pit bull, right? Like it's not like.
And your son's 3, so like
My son's
small.
3, so like my daughter's 3 now, and she's 35 pounds.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
Like she's not even as tall as my waist, and they're about the same size. So she's like 3 feet tall, maybe. Like that's how small they are, right? And like I remember, like I had a newborn, so my son looked big to me. But now that my daughter's that size, I'm like, oh my god, shoot, he was so small when that happened, right? And I remember, like we kind of clued in, and so the two of us are running there. My husband's there. He had kind of like tossed my daughter on top of this bench so that he could get like both hands on the dog, and then I clued in that like my daughter's, like my newborn, screaming on this bench, and so I let go of my son and then pick up her, and it was just like this whirlwind, like everyone's screaming, like my son screaming, his face is covered in blood, my husband like ripped off his shirt and like wipes off the kid's face, and like I'm holding my daughter, she's screaming, like it was just like disaster. It was such, and we weren't at home, like we were, and I remember like my mom was there, and I was like, you have to call 911, and I'm screaming for her to call 911, and she's like, I don't know, and I was like, this is the address, like, because we're not home, you know what I mean, we're in the middle of like rural Alberta, like it wasn't like, yeah, it was crazy. And then so we had like the ambulance show up and the paramedics, because we were like, we just need to make sure he's okay, we want to like take him to the children's, so they like checked his vitals and made sure everything's fine. It took like, I don't even know what time. It's like there's no time in that time. Like I don't know how long it took everyone to stop screaming. My husband's like chucking shit in the car, because we're like, trying, like we went there on vacation. We have like so much crap. We have 2 kids, so we're like just throwing stuff into the back of the SUV, and then like while like I'm sitting there holding my daughter, making sure my son's okay, they're like wrapping up his arm, because he had like a full like bite mark down both sides, so like punctures here and here, and then like teeth scraping down either side of his face, and then it had gone like right through his wrist too.
Whoa.
Yeah, and then there's bruises on his like inner thigh as well. Those ones didn't go through, but we got him checked out, and the paramedics were like, he'll be fine to take to the hospital, so we like booked it. We were like by Drumheller.
Did you guys drive?
Yeah,
Like
my husband drove.
Okay.
I sat in the back with the kids.
That's a lot, just because there's probably, well, first of all, everything that happened, but also like you're sitting there just seeing all this blood, being like, oh my god, like what's even going on? Like,
I don't even remember the blood. Like I just remember like holding my daughter. My husband has like my son, he was like on an island, like he lifted him up and put him up in the kitchen. The dog's owner had taken him and like locked the dog away. Mm-hmm. So haven't seen the dog since then.
Wow.
Other than in my mind.
But like, I've seen it.
Yeah, and we drove like, even the drive being like, my husband for sure was going like 160 or 180, like down the highway. We made it from there to the children's in under an hour.
From Drumheller?
Oh yeah.
Which is usually a what, 2 hour, 2.5?
It was like, yeah, we went so fast. And then this is like middle of COVID, right? My daughter was born in 2020. This is 2021, June of 2021. get to the children's, I have to drop them off there because like they only let one parent in. They let two parents in, but no siblings, right? So then I was like, I had to drop my son. So my husband like carries him in, and then I have to like leave and take my like 4-month-old daughter home and be home by myself with my newborn while my husband's at the hospital with my son.
Whoa. So how was that?
That was hard. Like that, I remember getting into, I dropped them off, and I remember like I had my daughter. I had her out of the car just because it was a long drive, and I remember I called my friend, and he's still like one of my best friends. Like I still work with him. I see him every day. We go to church together. I remember calling him and being like, my son got attacked by a dog, right? And he was like, what? Like, what do you mean? And I was like, I just dropped my husband and him off at the hospital. Like, I don't know what to do. And he was like, you need to be a mom to your daughter. That's all. Like, you have to just do that. You got to pull it together and like, just make it through that. Get her home. Like, you just got to focus on looking after her. And I was like, okay. So that's what I did. And I drove home, and I remember it was the first time ever she screamed the whole way home from the children's home. She had never screamed in the car before, and she screamed the whole way. And I was like, oh, I'm dealing with this, and there's a screaming child. And
I feel like this is making it so much worse.
Yeah, and I got home, and I like got her to bed, and I remember like, I think I called my dad because my dad wasn't there. I called my dad, and didn't really talk to anyone else. I talked to my husband a few times. He ended up like fighting for me to be able to come back. So like, because my son had to go into surgery. So, my husband essentially was like, I don't care what you say. Like, his sibling is a breastfeeding infant. Like, we don't have a choice but to bring the kid in. So they made an exception for us to come in.
That's so nice.
So I ended up bringing her back there. And I just had her in the carrier, and she just like slept as I spent time in like the hospital with them. And we were there like, you gotta watch like, they wheel them into surgery like awake. Like they take them away from you and they're still awake. And then they put them to sleep like in the surgical room. So you're just like the parents, like your kid's awake, like watching you.
Like being wheeled away.
Yeah.
Like.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I was just like,
I feel like what your friend said was really helpful. Like, I feel like just being like, you just have to be a mom to your daughter is like, it almost pulls you out of that state, and you're like, you're right. Like, I just have to do what I can do. It's almost like that, like, male energy that you kind of need, because men are so just like action focused that they're like, okay, just do what you have to do. Like, this is what you need to do. Just be a mom to your daughter, like whatever. Whereas women are very like, tell me what happened. Tell me all this stuff. Whereas that was very just like, this is what you need to do right now. Like, just focus on this,
And he's like usually the first person I would call when things happen. Like if it's not my husband, right? Like it would always be him. Like he's like, we call each other like, he's like my big brother and I'm his little sister, because in a lot of ways we're like closer with each other than our own siblings. But like it was just the first person I thought of calling in that moment, right? And yeah, that's for sure exactly what I needed. Easier said than done, but it was just kind of like, I had to snap out of it. Like you can't, my husband's with him, like he's okay, he's with his dad, like he's going to be okay. But like my daughter's 4 months old and like needs me to like keep her alive, really.
Pretty much.
Right? And I remember being like, even him, I think he even said something like, you have to make sure you're eating. Like you have to feed your kid. You have to make sure you're eating. Because I was like, I didn't want to eat. Like I was so like, so I'd be like, okay, I have to force myself to eat because I have to make sure that I still have like milk for my daughter because I can't just not eat.
I never even thought of that.
Yeah, like, so he even was like, said stuff like that to me. Like, but it was like physically hard to eat. Like, I was just like, I still like, there's 3 adults there that had to work together to like get that dog away from my kid. Like, what if there was no adults there? And I try not to think of what ifs, because that like puts you in like this anxiety spiral about it. But like, it's really hard not to think about the what ifs. Like, if we weren't there, he'd be dead. Like, that dog went for him more than one time. It wasn't like, oh, I'm gonna nip you because you got in my food.
Yeah, like, let me just bite your hand.
Right?
Know? Yeah, that was like full, like, and yeah, you're right. Like, a lot of times, like, because kids can be quite aggressive with animals because they don't really understand.
Yeah.
That, you know, they're still like a living thing that you can't just like grab at their fur and stuff. You know, some dogs are like, okay, just get away from me, like, stop grabbing my fur. But for him to not have done anything, then it's like, that's scary for you because you just never know what's going to happen, you know? Like, it's just... Yeah.
And we have a dog. Like, we have a husky at home. He grew up with the husky. Like, I had both my kids at home with my dog there. Like, do you know what I mean? So, like, that was really important to me that when I had my children, like, obviously, like, the dog knows something's going on because I'm, like, pushing a kid out upstairs. Like, she, like, like, what is happening? But like, that was like the first not, she's not a person, but the first like living thing that met both of our kids was like, we brought the dog up to the bedroom and she met like the babies and has always been with them. And we've always told them, like, we're very clear about like what's okay and not okay to do with dogs. Right? And our dog's like wonderful with them, but she'll even get to points where she'll like look at us and be like, get this kid off of me. And then we have to be like, dude, like,
Stop.
Don't need to set up your play-thing like right where the dog's eating. Like, that's just like, that's asking for trouble.
Yeah.
Don't
like,
do that.
Why?
Right?
Okay, wait. We also you had your kids at home, right?
Yeah.
Okay, yes. Because you're like, I pushed out my kids and I was like, wait, you did have both of them at home.
Yeah.
Do you want to say any details about that? Or like, did you always want to do that?
Do you want me to talk about that? Because I had talked about that for hours. So it was like
Really?
the best 2 days of my life.
Kind of. I feel like I'm so interested because I actually don't know anyone that has had their kids at home. Do I know some? I don't think so.
You know me.
I know you now. Yay. So
I actually
me,
like was introduced to the concept by a friend who had her kids at home. And she actually has 5 now, and she had all 5 at home.
At home.
Yeah. I worked with her at the gym too. And she had her kids got to be like 3-ish years older than my oldest. Maybe more. So quite a bit longer before I had my kid. And yeah, because her kid was our like ring bearer in our wedding, and he was 2. So 3 or 4 years older. And she introduced me to the concept, and she was like really like well versed and well researched in it, and she used midwives, and I had no clue what that even was, right? Like, because that's not like, you watch Grey's Anatomy and like that's all you see is like that type of birth. And so I did a lot more research on it, and there was like a Netflix documentary on it for the longest time, and I think they've taken it off. But I remember when we first started having, like, we got pregnant, or we were talking about getting pregnant, and I said to my husband, I'm like, I'm having the kids at home. And he was like, what are you talking about? What do you mean you're having the kids at home?
He's like, what?
Like, that's not happening. Like, what if something happens? I was like, okay, well, 90% of the time something's not gonna happen. Like, if childbirth was like a thing that required like so much medical intervention, like, we wouldn't be a race. Like, we wouldn't be a species.
That's
like,
so
that's
true.
Like women are
Why have
supposed
I
to have
never
children.
thought of that?
So I mean, like God bless medical like interventions for like being able to save mothers that otherwise wouldn't have done it. I don't like deny that for like in any way, but I think the majority of women are capable of having a regular childbirth, and I think a lot of what ends up being medical interventions is because there's medical interventions to start with, like getting induced and like getting epidurals, and like all these things just lead to more and more interventions and more steps, and just disrupt like the natural process that childbirth is. Like, we put time limits on it. It's like, oh, it has to be done in 24 hours. Says who? Are you God? Did you decide this woman is going to have a child in 24 hours? Why is that the limit? You go to the hospital and that's the limit. They induce you at 41 weeks. It's like, did you know that 90% of births are at 41 weeks? Why is that considered not term? Like, that's considered over term? That makes no sense. The majority of C-sections happen at like 5 p.m. on a Friday because that's when the doctors want to go home. That's also bullshit. Like, come on. Like, it's just like...
Well, I guess I'm having an at-home birth if I
You don't have
kids.
to.
Like,
and I mean, like,
no,
I think women can choose whatever direction they want as long as it's their choice and they have the ability to advocate for themselves, because all births are beautiful, whether they're C-sections, whether they're in the hospital, whether they're at home, as long as it's like that's the way you chose to have your birth.
So do you just lay on your bed with like, or are you in a tub, or are you like,
what's the
vibe? Like, I'm like, how do we do that? Are we like on the floor in the living room?
No, I did like most of my laboring in my bedroom. My son was like a really long labor, and I had really bad back labor, so I was on my hands and knees a lot because I was like, that was the only thing that felt okay. I actually like ended up getting rug burn on my knees because that's like, I was just kneeling on the carpet for like 24 hours. And then it was really slow. I think I was like 27 hours into like that, and I was just like, I remember being like, I can't do this anymore. Like, I remember the midwives checking, like, you're 4 centimeters. And I was like, fuck my life. I'm 4 centimeters. Like, what is happening right now?
What are you supposed to be?
10. I was like, I was losing my marbles.
You're like, dude, it's been like 20 something hours. Like, just come out. Like,
yeah.
Oh
and
my
then,
God.
So they ended up breaking my water, which is like an interesting. There's like, she's like, we can break your water. It might make things happen faster. Cool. And they literally pull out like a crochet hook. It's like this long with a hook on the end. And I was like, that's what?
You're like, why do I have to see that? Can you just do it without
My
me
husband looks at it and he's like just like the things that happen when you're going through, like, it's like, you don't even care.
No, you don't care.
There's like full like fists up there. Like, it doesn't matter. She broke my water and my son came like, it was like within an hour.
Wow.
Maybe 3. It was like 1 to 3 hours of her breaking.
3 hours is fine compared to like 24. Like,
yeah, it was so she broke my water. I went from 4 centimeters to 10 centimeters in like an hour, which was a lot. That part's the hardest. Once you get to push, it's fine. You just gotta make it to that point. The pushing part's easy. Especially if you go to the gym. You'll be fine. So she put me on, like, she's like, you have a squatty potty. Do you know what a squatty potty is? The, like, stools that go around your toilet that you put your feet on so you, like, poop better. Okay, so I have those because I'm a trainer, and, like, that was, like, a thing, like, 10 years ago. I was like, oh, the squatty potty.
My friend had one of those in Vancouver. Great. Loved it.
It's like, why would you poop any other way?
Yeah.
Anyways, so she's like, you have a squatty potty. Great. I want you to sit on the toilet. You can practice pushing. Because it's like, it's just like pooping. You're just pushing. It's fine. I was like, okay. She's like, most people push for like 1 to 3 hours. And I was like, oh my God, I gotta push. Like, I've done this for so long. I have to push for 1 to 3 hours. And she was like, yeah, just practice pushing. The next contraction that comes, you're gonna feel like you need to push so you can push. And I was like push? Really push? Or just like sort of push? Oh, really push. So I really pushed. And like my son literally came out and had to yank me off the toilet. And he like fell out. The midwife got him.
Oh my God.
So I tell him that. I was like, you almost came out into the toilet. And he tells people, I was born on the toilet.
He's proud. Like,
yeah.
That's so funny.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Squatting position. And then my daughter was like, that whole labor with my daughter was like 3 hours start to finish. Yeah. And I was on my bed on my hands and knees with her.
Wow. Mm-hmm. And you don't really get a ticket out. You
want to though.
Yeah. Well, you're in it for like 27 fucking hours.
I literally, even with my daughter, because I had no break. It was just like contraction after contraction. I remember like my husband being like, I can't do this. And he was like, you have to do this. You don't have a choice. You have to do this.
Like, can I just...
Another one, like, that's going to kill me. He's like, you're not going to die. You're fine. He's just like holding my hand. So calm.
You're completely dramatic. Like,
you're just like, feel like you're going to die.
Yeah, well, yeah, yeah.
Or
I've
like,
heard
I
it's
don't know
pretty
if I
bad.
can withstand another thing that's that painful. And then baby comes out and it's like all gone. There's no more pain. Just
That's what I've
over
heard. It's just like,
instantly.
yeah, it's just done.
Yeah,
Like, that's so
it's
cool.
weird.
That is so. Maybe we'll have you. Maybe that'll be our part two with our old fashions. We'll just go really in detail with like the midwives and shit. I'm just kidding.
They're
um,
great ladies. I would have another kid just so I could be around the midwives again,
I love that.
but I won't have another kid.
You're like, but I'm done. I'm
Done.
done. Okay.
Done. But yeah, so I think like the way I run like was that we had a dog at home, right? So we had already taught him how to be around dogs. So it was like it wasn't something he did.
It wasn't new. Yeah. Like.
Yeah, and then I left. My husband stayed the night there. I had to leave. So I had to leave again because I had to get my daughter home. She screamed the whole way home again from the hospital.
You're like, great.
And I remember I went to bed with her. She slept with me, so her and I like slept together. And then my husband, like, I wasn't there when my son woke up, so he was there and he like made sure to call me when he was out of recovery and woke up. And then the next day I went to pick them up from the hospital, and I just remember seeing him come out and his whole face is just swollen. Like his face was like, a circle. Well, you've seen him. He's like he was 5 pounds when he was born. He's always been skinny, Binny, right? And his whole face was swollen. He had like drag marks, like bite drag marks down, like both his cheeks, and he had stitches over like both his eyebrows and like here. And then they had to cut his wrist open because the teeth had punctured his wrist. So they needed to open up his wrist to make sure it didn't like sever tendons or muscles. And it was like a millimeter.
Oh my God, that's lucky.
Yeah. And so he had like a cast, like a little cast on his hand. And then we had to give him antibiotics for a week, twice a day. And literally had to like hold this kid down screaming and force feed him antibiotics, which is like, just give more to us to like handle.
Make it even more difficult.
Yeah.
So like with all of this, because even like seeing your son like this and you going through, obviously your own emotions, like how did you balance all that? Because, you're balancing your emotions, what you're feeling with all of it, but then also like.
I think a lot of the time I like honestly stuffed most of it down and it like came out in other ways. So like I wasn't really working at the time. I was doing a little bit of online training, so there was no like face to face. I had to be with people. So my day in and day out was like being a mom with both my kids. So I think I just kind of leaned into that and just tried to be the best mom I could with them. I think looking back, I was probably like a little bit more like highly anxious and like hyper vigilant about things and like quick to react with stuff. And as like you get further away from like the trauma, it's like that's not as present, but your like reactionary behaviors are like still there. And then they've kind of like been born from that. So, and I think a lot of it came out in like how my husband and I like dealt with each other, because like that's something too where it's like you're both this kid's parent and you both have experienced that in different ways. Like mine from like a very specific standpoint in terms of like the relationship I had, with the person that owned the dog. I was very close to that person. I had a really close relationship with them. So that was like a challenge for me. And then from my husband's perspective, like that was a different relationship for him. And then he was like the dad in the situation. And I really feel like men have that, like they're wired to protect. And so when that doesn't happen, I think it hits them differently. Whereas like we're wired to like nurture, and I was still able to like do that and be like comforting and be there. But I just like, I sometimes, like get like a feeling in my gut when I think about what my husband was probably having to go through, being like, do I put my daughter down or do I like help my son in that situation? Because he had both kids when that dog attack happened, and I was like, I can't imagine being like, which one do I go to?
Yeah, like trying to pick between the two and trying to essentially just protect the family, because that's what like, I mean, that's what men are like wired to do biologically, really.
Yeah.
So, oh yeah, that would be hard.
And I feel like it impacted like a lot of our communication because both of us had so much emotions about it, and like, you know, like hurt and anger and like really, really being scared and like having to like relive that and like process that. And it made it like, I think it just kind of like puts a magnifying glass on like maybe communication challenges that were already there that like you don't know about unless you're dealing with something huge. I think that's true for any marriage. Like it's all fine until it's not fine. Right? And like really when something hard happens was when you really see how that person handles something hard happening, and you can be like, oh, this makes sense because this is how you generally communicate, and that serves you when things are normal. But when things aren't normal, we have to be able to adjust that. And I learned that about myself too, right? Like I learned that like my like biggest thing when something happens is that like I want to like run away, and if I can't run away, then I'll fight, right? And it's like, okay, I can't like escape from this, and I can't fight about it. So like, what's my next step? How do we address this together so we can have like a conversation about what happened or what the next steps are, or how we deal with all the relationships that were impacted by this one event without having a full-on fight about it, even though we're on the same side, right?
Yeah,
So,
but like you really like, first of all, communication is so important to be able to talk about those things, but also like I feel like when you're thrown into those kinds of situations, like you're literally forced to grow at that point, because you're forced to do things that, like you said, you like to run, but like in that situation, like you can't, like you have to deal with the trauma that's just happened, right? So, yeah.
yeah, and we went to therapy for a bit, and it just like, oh, it was the wrong therapist. It made it way worse. And like, my husband's like, I'm never doing that again.
Like never.
I was like, oh, I'm not doing that person. And then I ended up getting a referral to a psychiatrist from my doctor. And that was like really good for me to go. It was finally like able to be in person, because I feel like the Zoom, dealing with something like that over Zoom was just not ideal. So I finally got to go in to see a psychiatrist, and this was like, I had the kids in daycare. My son was in grade 1. So I finally had like days of my own. And like, so that's when I really like started more of that healing process, going to see the psychiatrist, like working through the trauma therapy, like doing like the EMDR, like eye movement stuff, like really, figuring that out and figuring out like what my real like fears about it were. Because I remember, like, prior to going there, I would, like, have a panic attack if I would see a pit bull. Or, like, there's times where, like, you know, I would take my dog to dog parks, and if a dog, like, ran at me funny, I'd have a panic attack. Like, I remember that happening, and I just was like, I can't live like this. Like, I'm not scared of dogs. I'm not a person that's scared of dogs. Like, I know that, like, nothing's going to happen, but, like, I can't be reacting like that, because then my dog's going to react. Like, I can't go walking my dog in, like, a panic state, because, like, that's not going to serve her well either, right? But, so that's when I really was like, I gotta get this fixed. Like, I can't.
Figured out. Yeah, but it's crazy how, like, you know, if you have the right therapist, it's great, but if you don't have the right therapist, it's awful. Like, you really have to hunt for the right person.
Yeah,
right?
and this, like, psychiatrist really helped me with that, like, really realizing, like, what's the staircase to, like, exposure for this, you know? Because, like, maybe right now you're not ready to, like, go to a dog park. But, like, where can we start you at? Are you fine walking your dog on a leash? Yes. Okay, are you fine, like, looking at a picture of that dog? No. Okay, like, let's move that back. What do you, like, and so you just, like, that's how you overcome anxiety, right? Is by, like, exposing yourself to a little bit more of anxiety-inducing things to the point that it no longer gives you anxiety. Like, that's what you have to do.
That's so cool.
Yeah. Right? So, so I worked through that. And then, I mean, like, even with my husband, like, we honestly, like, most of it was because, like, I had faith and I, like, leaned into, like, prayer a lot, and I, like, really just wanted, like, that's how I grew up. That's, like, I wouldn't have made it through it if I didn't have that portion of my life where I could, like, sit and pray about it and, like, really feel like I was giving it to God and, like, relying on that for, like, my healing of the process. And then I kind of had to give, like, I wanted to fix my husband too. I wanted to be like, I'm doing all this work. What are you doing? I need you to fix. I need us to grow together. I need us to do these things. And I had this new therapist that really was like, you can't do that. Like, you just got to do you, and then you got to let him do him. And I think a lot of, like, the fights were like me trying to, like, force something to be happening. And so we just decided together, like, we started going back to church. We brought the kids to church, and, like, that really helped our relationship too, because it just gave us, like, there's this thing that happened. We can't let it keep happening. Let's just, like, focus on something outside of ourselves, move on in, like, a positive way, and, like, trust that, like, our lives can be changed from it. And, like, there's been, like, a huge transformation in, like, our marriage and our family over, like, the last year of just, like, me finding, like, a really awesome therapist, and, like, us, like, going to church together and, like, doing that type of thing. My therapist laughed at me because she was like, she was like, I've never heard anyone say this, but we're like, my husband won't go to therapy, so I made him go to church. I was like, yep.
Whatever works.
That's what she said. She was like, whatever works, but
Yeah.
no one's ever said that to me before. I was like, it's kind of like group therapy, where you don't have to, like, talk about your own problems, but you can get solutions. Right?
Ah, that's true.
So I think that's...
Does he not talk that much?
He talks a lot more now. Like, that event, like, made it, like...
Yeah.
Right?
Definitely.
So we tend to talk a lot more.
Yeah.
It's, like, definitely, there's, like, really hard times coming out of that, where we had to, like... It's like we were on different pages. It's like, how do we're processing this differently. We have different... We've experienced it differently, right? So we have to process it differently. You know, I'm feeling like a failure in, like, how I'm being a mom. He probably has his moments of feeling like a failure in how he's doing it. I think, generally speaking, men have a harder time dealing with, like, that level and that vast amount of emotions because they've grown up saying they're not supposed to feel things. Whereas, like, I'm like bawling my eyes out and, like, crying so hard I'm barfing and, like, not, do you know what I mean? And he's just like, it's okay, we're fine. He's like, I can cry with me. You know?
That's funny.
I remember, like, I would hold it all in. Like, you know, you have to just, like, show up for your kids. Like, it's not like I could go to therapy twice a week and just, like, sit and deal with my emotions and, like, you know. I remember going for runs, and I would go for a run, and I'd, like, get to a point in every run where I just would, like, burst out crying and, like, be, like, on the side of the road just, like, sobbing because you just, like, can't keep it in anymore. I did that, like, every day for, like, months.
You just have to let it out.
It just, like, it was, like, involuntary, you know, where it's like your body, like, you're gonna push yourself physically, like, it's gonna have some sort of emotional reaction, but that's when it would always, like, come out, right?
That's when you know you're really, like, going through it, is when you're, like, because usually you can go exercise and you feel great and you're like, everything's fine. But when you're really going through it, it's like you start exercising and then halfway through you're, like, crying in the bathroom, and then you come back out and, like, finish it. You know, just normal girl shit.
Yeah.
But it's fine.
Yeah.
You have, like, a different view on mom guilt. And I feel like, okay, so I feel like I've had a couple people talk about mom guilt, but I'm really interested in just the way that you explained it to me when we talked last. So what's your view on mom guilt?
That it doesn't exist. That view?
Yeah.
Okay, that's not my, so I'm going to credit my therapist. And her name's Chelsea. She's wonderful. But she's the one that told me about it. She challenged me on it because I was dealing with mom guilt. And I think I started seeing her because of all this stuff. And because I remember my first meeting with her, and she was like, what do you want to accomplish by this? I'm like, I need to, like, be able to show up better for my kids and be able to, like, communicate better with my husband. And I just feel like I'm always here. Like I just can't like self-regulate. And I think that came out of like dealing with all that trauma and like trying to process that, you know. You're friggin' like have a newborn and that happens. Like everything's dramatic when you're like in the first year of being a mom, no matter like what anybody says. And so I had like a lot of these like things where I would guilty, feel guilty about everything. And I don't even think that's the right word, because like guilt is like if you're convicted of a crime, you're guilty of a crime. Like, so it's like you've done something wrong in the eyes of like the law, or wrong in the eyes of like some moral code that you have, or you like didn't do something that aligns with your values, right? So like that's what guilt is, right? And she was like, are you doing things that are causing you to be guilty? Like, are you acting out of line with your values? So the example she gave me was like, if you and your husband agree that you value saving your money and being frugal and doing all these things, and then you go and you gamble online at lunchtime behind his back, you should feel guilty because you're acting out of line with agreed upon values that you've set forth, right? So it's like, that's something you should feel guilty for. If you take an hour to go to the gym and leave your kids with their dad, like, why the hell are you feeling guilty? Like, why is that? What are you doing that's wrong? You're like looking after yourself, you know, you're spending time working on your health. You're setting a good example for your kids. You know, you probably come back as a better mom. It's only an hour. Like, your kids can survive without you for an hour. So it's like, why are we feeling guilty about those type of things? So she reframed it for me as like, maybe it's not guilt. And maybe it's more like you're either feeling like grief or you're feeling gratitude. So it's like, and it can be both things. So like say it's not even an hour at the gym. Say you take a night and you go at a hotel because you need some time by yourself without your kids, right? It's like you can feel sadness and grief because like you probably do miss them. And you can also feel like immense gratitude that you have like the ability to do that, or that your partner is so supportive of you to do that. But it's like, doing that in and of itself is not acting out of line with your values. It's not like you're still adhering to a moral code. You don't need to feel guilt about it. Right?
Yeah, it's actually like brilliant. Like when you said that, when we talked last, I was like, that's like, I just feel like reframing it. I'm not even a mom, but like reframing that for the moms is probably so good. Because
there's things you can feel
100%
guilty
true.
for. Like there's times I freak out and scream at my kids, and like I feel guilty for that. And maybe it's not guilt, maybe I feel shame for that because like I wasn't my best self in that moment. And then, but like, how do you resolve that? You admit that you did something wrong and you apologize for it. And like, I try to do that with my kids because I mess up. I yell at them, you know, I say things I don't mean, and they'll be like, Mommy was wrong. She had some messy feelings and didn't handle them very well. I'm really sorry I yelled at you. And then you move on, right? But it's like, even like tonight, I'm here and I left the kids at night. Dad put them to bed by themselves. And like 2 years ago, I wouldn't have even done it. It would have like eaten me up inside. I would have felt so bad leaving. So it's like, oh, why would I do that? I shouldn't leave. I should be there to put them to bed. And today I'm just like, man, like I'm pretty excited. It's really freaking awesome that like my husband's like that supportive that I can go do that. And it's like, I kind of miss putting them to bed. Like I miss the snuggles and like, you know, that's like there's like a twinge of sadness, but like I don't feel guilty about it.
It's literally brilliant. Like, so brilliant.
That's why I gotta credit the person that told me. Yeah, I'm like, it's not my idea, I swear. But I do tell people about it because I think like mom guilt. Oh man, social media just sucks.
It deserves to be shared, to be honest.
It's just like, frick, man, stop like making women hate on each other.
Oh yeah,
it's like
totally.
It's for sure a woman that created mom guilt because she felt guilty and was thinking like, oh, let's just make all other moms feel horrible too because like I'm having issues. That's what it was, for sure.
Whoever that was, take your posts down. Just kidding. Okay, so advice that you would give, like if there's anyone else that's going through, we're gonna go with moms that are going through something traumatic. Maybe it's isolating. Maybe they just, maybe it's affecting their relationship because they went through something traumatic. Like, what advice would you give them?
I think we're all gonna go through something traumatic, especially as moms. So it's like good to prepare ourselves. And it might not be something as traumatic as like your kid almost dying from a dog attack, but it's like, I think you'll feel like it just as viscerally when your kid comes home from school and they've been bullied. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yes.
it's like that, like, you have like this constant, like, hyper awareness of like, my kid could get hurt one day. And like, that's an awful feeling, right? But it's like, I think you just have to, what advice do I have? The things that I did was like, I made sure that and I've been working on this a lot lately with my therapist, because I tend to be really calculated with like what I say and how I say it, because I'm very concerned about like how it impacts other people. And so I've been trying not to do that as much, to be like, my feelings and what I say are valid, and like, it doesn't really matter how you take them, especially like big feelings like that. So I think like having a person or a space that you can go to and like say exactly what you need to say and feel exactly what you need to feel without having to hold back is like super important, because like that has cleansing properties right there. And it's like, maybe it's your spouse, maybe it's not your spouse, because sometimes that relationship's like too close too. So like, that's why I opted for like my therapist, for instance, because that's like a safe space where it's like, even if I say something completely offside, it's not going to come back and, you know, be taken the wrong way or held against me, because we all say things that we don't mean to say when we're hurting. And then I think it's like, you have to show up for your kids, of course, but like, you also have to show up for yourself too. And that's why I like kept up with my fitness and like really embraced what I do for a job and like put myself into that. Like, I don't think any of my clients like knew what was going on, because I still showed up in like the best way I could for all those things. Like, there's other things in your life. That trauma doesn't define you. I think there's like so much in our society now where it's like, oh, my childhood trauma, and it's like somehow who you are. And it's like, well, we all have it. We all have trauma. We've all experienced horrible things. Some people's more than others, but how do you explain the people that had the worst possible childhood ever that ended up as like these wonderful, well-rounded people? Because it's like, that's something that happened to you. It's not part of who you are. Right? And it's like, and that's why I like try to teach my kid to, like, I didn't want him to like grow up thinking like that one event was like who he was. He talks about it. We talk about it with him. There's no emotion with it. We just like, this is an event that happened. How did it make you feel? Cool. Do you have any questions about it? Okay. That was really hard to do. Really hard to do. And just like giving yourself time. It's like, it's not going to get fixed overnight, and it's not going to fix as fast as you think it is. And then you're going to think you're fine. And then one day you're going to talk about it in a podcast and be like, I have feelings that I'm like, okay, maybe feelings I need to like revisit and like make sure that I'm okay with it and can like move on.
When's my therapist appointment this week? Just kidding.
Like, have a January 6th is my next one. But I think it's just like, so much of like being a parent's like putting on a brave face for your kids, which I think is important, but I also think it's okay to let them like see like that feelings are real too, and to talk to them. Like, I remember talking to him about it. I remember one time I was like, oh, this was like the worst thing. I remember driving. I remember where I was when I was driving. I remember what car, I remember what light I was at. And I remember he's sitting in the back seat and he's like, hey mom, we're like, remember that time I got attacked by a dog? And I was like, yeah, I remember that. And he's like, why didn't you get there faster? And I was like, oh man, buddy, I'm gonna live my whole life wishing that I got there faster. Like, ugh, like feel like choked up telling that story, because that was like the one thing that I still remember being like, yeah, I wish I got there faster. But like, what's that gonna do? Like, I can't go back in time, right? But like, they'll still talk to you about it. And it's like, if I react as like, oh man, it's this horrible thing, it's like, then that's what's gonna become for him. And I just have to like, it's like, yeah, this is something that happened. How do you feel about it? Do you have questions about it? What can I do to help you? Do you need a hug? Do you want to talk about it more? You like, just like that type of thing, and like leave it really open for him. and like not be scared to show him that like, you know, I was scared and it hurts me and that's okay. Like, got to be brave, but you got to be real for your kids, and just have like a community you can surround yourself with that is there for you, but that also challenges you. I remember having like tons of people around me and being like, am I okay? Like, is it like, am I acting out of line? Like, should I be feeling this way? Like, tell me if I'm off, you know, like to have like that constant like feedback on like, am I doing okay with this? Sometimes it's okay to ask that too. They'd be like, no, maybe you're thinking about that wrong, or like, no, you're complete. Like, don't surround yourself with yes people being like, yeah, you got fucked over. Keep doing what you're doing. It's like, you need people that are going to be like, Kaylee, it's time to move on. Let's like get, you know, let's take the next step.
People that are going to be really real with you, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Kaylee, thank you so much for being on the Lifted podcast. I feel like that was just really eye-opening and just like amazing for everyone that was listening, including myself. So, yay, very happy to have you on. Thank you guys so much for listening. I will see you guys at the next episode. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. And yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I had fun. Sorry, I cried. I didn't cry.
Fine.
Almost cried. That's like the hardest
Choked
line.
up.
Oh,
You didn't
man.
cry.